Welcome to my latest Hammer horror review. You'll find all the others in my Hammer horror playlist. Today I'm doing Phantom of the Opera, which I had not previously seen until just the other night. This was directed by Terence Fisher and stars Herbert Lom, Michael Gough, Edward de Souza and Heather Sears, among others. I've only really heard of Michael Gough out of those actors, and I've heard of director Terence Fisher. I could easily believe that he never went home on an evening during the early 60s. He was involved in directing that many Hammer films. Now, Phantom of the Opera is something I've heard about since I was a kid. I've just never seen it. I mean, there are countless TV adaptations of this, film adaptations, theatre productions. Andrew Lloyd Webber made a musical out of it. It's a very famous thing. So on the one hand, I thought to myself coming into this, well, it must be good if they keep remaking it. But on the flip side of that coin, I also thought, I've never met anybody who actually likes this, so it could have gone either way, this one. The story involves this disfigured man, the Phantom, who lives below an opera house, and he has a beef with the opera house owner because of reasons which have gone into in the film. And so just before the opening of this new show, he tries to jeopardize it by breaking into the theatre on a night and ruining musical instruments and stealing the music sheets of the lead composer. And then a body turns up in the rafters on the opening night, which may also be the work of the Phantom, maybe. There's more to the plot than that, but that's enough to get you going. That's sort of the general gist. Now, before we get into my positives and negatives, let me quickly show you the version of this that I have. I would have preferred to have rented this, having never seen it before, but I couldn't find it available to rent anywhere. So I dropped £20 on a Blu-ray. I thought to myself, well, even if it's bad, I suppose it will at least add to my growing Hammer collection that I have. Not much in the way of features. There's one documentary, which I've not seen, so I couldn't tell you how good that is. And there's also a stills gallery, and that's it. There's no commentaries or anything. Most importantly, the picture on this is very, very crisp and clear for such an old film, so that's good. So I guess I'll start by saying that I love the setting of this, the idea of spending most of a movie inside an opera house. I really like the idea of going to watch theatre and opera, even if I don't actually do it. I think if my day was 48 hours long instead of 24 hours, then maybe I would find the time for it. I'm not just saying that. I actually used to act in amateur theatre for a time when I was in my mid-20s. It was just a little hobby that I had, and I sort of gave it up because family got in the way, career got in the way. But I've been in and around the backstage of productions and shows. I've acted in shows. I know that world. So to sit down and watch an entire movie taking place around, in this case, an opera house, was pleasing to me anyway. I can't think of any other films that I've seen which take place entirely in a theatre. I guess Demons took place entirely in a cinema. I reviewed that quite recently. That's almost the same thing. I can name some examples where my favourite scene in a movie has been at an opera house. So Mission Impossible 5, Rogue Nation, the best part of that film for me takes place at an opera house. Quantum of Solace, the best part of that movie, takes place in an opera house. And if I just sidestep into the world of video games, my favourite level in Tomb Raider 2, one of my favourite games of all time on the PS1, took place in an opera house. So I like the setting. I guess that's what I'm driving at. I also like the fact that we get to see some of the opera show, the show within the show in this film. I mean, it's mostly padding, that kind of stuff, but I still appreciated getting to watch 15 or 20 seconds here or there of the actual opera. So there's this one bit where it's like a play, but they're singing all the lines instead of saying them. The king has declared a new tax law. You know, they're just singing all the lines. It just tickles me. But you've got to admire the fact that there are actors who are really like that, who can sing like that, as if it's a play. It's really bizarre. I also liked it when you just get to sit and watch some of the women just singing in these really high voices. It's just really impressive. I like the two main characters in this, those two being Christine and Harry. They get to form a little friendship, and then that turns into romance. That romance comes out of nowhere in this film, but at the same time, I thought to myself, oh yeah, I guess they have been sort of getting close throughout this movie, but in a really natural way where I've not even really thought about it. So I think that was good writing. It's a real benefit for this movie that those characters are so likable. And I did think that that romance was cute, and I definitely wanted them to survive as they got into the final third of the movie. Remember, I've never seen anything to do with Phantom of the Opera before, so I did not know how this film was going to pan out. Speaking of that romance, there are a couple of really funny scenes in this film as well, and the first of them comes when Christine and Harry are just about to have their first kiss. They're in the back of this carriage, and the coach driver keeps interrupting them just as they're about to kiss. It's really funny. That coach driver is played by an actor that I'm pretty sure I've seen in several other Hammer films, usually in very small comedic roles. I can't think of his name, but he's a very distinctive looking actor. There's also a funny scene where we meet this guy who's a rat catcher. He comes out of the shadows with these dirty teeth and says a couple of lines and then wanders off, and that's the last we see of him. But just the fact that he exists, that this was a job apparently in London in 1900. You could be a rat catcher, you know, you'd be employed or given a few pounds here and there just to, or I guess it would have been shillings, just to go and catch rats so they don't bother people anymore. It's funny to me anyway. I guess I should say a little bit about the Phantom's central storyline and whether that's satisfying. I think it is to a point. I did feel some sympathy for him as more of his backstory is revealed, more of his tragic circumstances are unwrapped for us to see. But for the most part, this is a story about Christine and Harry, and the Phantom is more of a third character as far as I can tell. I do like the scene at the end where Christine is singing and you see the Phantom up in the gantry and this little tear rolls down his cheek. That's a very emotional scene. I'm a little bit confused about the Phantom's motivations in this film, though, because on the one hand, he's trying to ruin Lord D'Arcy's shows by wrecking musical equipment and stuff like that. On the other, he's training up Christine to be the world's best opera singer so she can go and be a knockout in the same shows that he's simultaneously trying to ruin. It doesn't really make sense. I'm also a little bit confused about the dwarf character. I don't know what he's about at all. He seems to be working for the Phantom, but he's also randomly murdering people like a stagehand and the Ratcatcher. I mean, does he do that so that the rats get free and that's another way that the show can be terrorized? I don't know. It's just really weird. We never even get any resolution to this subplot either. The dwarf is still free at the end of the movie. Everybody seems to have forgotten about the murders. I can't imagine that the Phantom would be telling the dwarf to actually go and kill people because the Phantom doesn't seem to be that type of person. At the end of the film, he breaks into Lord D'Arcy's house and you think he's going to finally get his revenge and kill this guy or something, but all he does is take his mask off, give him a little scare, and then Lord D'Arcy runs out of the room, and that's the last you see of that character. So that would actually be my first negative that I'm going to say today, the lack of a resolution as well for the Lord D'Arcy character, because he's a complete dickhead, and we absolutely hate this guy throughout the film. I mean, he's trying to get singers to sleep with him just so that he will give them roles in his shows. He's stealing bits of music for himself. He's doing all these dastardly things. And at the end, his comeuppance is to be scared out of a room. I mean, it's bizarre, you know. I mean, why would somebody's revenge be a case of, hey, Lord D'Arcy, I've waited a long time for this. Rawr! And now that I've given you a little scare, my revenge is complete. Yeah, I'm not sure that works for me as a little bit of scripting. So it's just a really weird thing that the movie ends on. In terms of the dwarf, I get why that stuff had to be in the film, because I think if you take his moonlighting as a murderer out of this story, then the only horror that you're left with is the Phantom occasionally saying something creepy through a crack in the wall of the women's dressing rooms. But it's just really odd that we never really find out what's going on with him. I also don't like how the Phantom dies. It's a little bit contrived. It's like a comedy of errors. I think they should have just killed him by having him keel over from his previously acquired afflictions. As it is, we're meant to believe that this opera house has this big black medieval chandelier perfectly aligned with where a singer would stand during a show, and it's only attached to the ceiling with this one small little rope which could easily unfurl at any moment and send the chandelier crashing down onto some poor singer's head. No. I've also got to question how the Phantom managed to get a king-size double bed into his lair. I mean, surely he didn't lump that thing through the opera house with the dwarf helping him carry it. If there is a secret passage between the sewer and the opera house, it surely would only be some kind of thin little slit or something, not a space big enough to fit a double bed. And the only other way into the sewer that was shown in the film is by swimming under this grate in the water. So how did he get a king-size double bed in there? You'd think he would have kept things simple and just settled for a sleeping bag or something, unless he went to IKEA and bought like a flat pack and then set the bed up once he was back in his lair. I don't know. I also think some of the flashback scenes in this film drag on a little long. I'm speaking mainly of when Professor Petrie goes back to the printing press room. We only need to see a few seconds of him getting burned. We don't need to see minutes at a time of him coming in the door, moving around, and it just goes on and on and on. And I guess for my final negative, I'll mention the fact that it's a little bit contrived that Christine just happens to rent the same boarding house that Professor Petrie used to rent, therefore giving Harry the chance to stumble across the musical sheets which will give the game away that it wasn't Lord D'Arcy who originally wrote the music. I mean, this is London, right? The chances of Petrie and Christina happening to rent the same place, not that great, unless you're going to tell me that this is an apartment building which is right next to the opera house, so there would have been a good chance that they could rent the same place. I don't know. On the whole, though, I still enjoyed this film. It does have its faults. I think it's one of those that if you overthink it, then it might go down in your estimations a little bit. But I had a good time. I would certainly watch this film again. And I think it's time to get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score we have for it. Got 1, 2, 2.5 bloody axes out of 5 for the Hammer Horror version of Phantom of the Opera. That is my average score, so not brilliant, not crap, just kind of in the middle, and I can live with that with a film this old. So I'll be back soon with another Hammer Horror review. I think I'm going to do Kiss of the Vampire next, which is another film I've not actually seen, so that will be interesting. Sort of a vampire film, but not in the Dracula sub-series. So until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.